Yeah, that goes under the same type thing. Generally, the majority of scholars say you can. There are some scholars that say it's a bid'ah. But yeah, the majority say you can. Yeah, but there's a valid opinion about dhikr, group dhikr, where people actually say dhikr together. Some say it's makruh, some say it's prohibited, but those are very weak opinions. They really are. But when they're there, so they shouldn't be just rejected. Oh, that's rubbish. No, those are valid opinions of valid scholars. But the majority of scholars say it is permissible to gather to do dhikr. Ata ibn Rabah said, he was asked about the hiluq al-dhikr, the gatherings of dhikr, and he said, they're the circles of halal and haram. In other words, learning fiqh, that's the real circles of dhikr. But that's true, that's, if you haven't learned that, you shouldn't be doing dhikr, because that's a fard ayn to learn that. So you should learn, it's important to learn. But there are many hadiths about people gathering, reciting the Quran together, gathering, saying La ilaha illallah together. There are many sound hadiths. I mean, they just shouldn't be in the same circle. You know, if there's, you know, if they're not distracted by one another. And I mean, this, you know, we're together, we're mingling and things like that. You know, these things are just out of adab for the way I was taught. You know, people here, we're living in the West, we're in very different circumstances than cultures that are isolated. And not all Muslim cultures are isolated. I mean, some cultures have a segregation between the sexes, others don't. In most historical Muslim countries, there was a lot of adab about this, and you know, a lot of reasons for that. In the West, we tend to intermix a lot, and people should still have adab and things like that. You know, I mean, most of you have studied in university. You've studied sitting next to men and women. You know, I mean, we've all done that, and it didn't destroy us. We didn't turn into, you know, crazy people or something like that. But it's just adab. People, the Prophet ﷺ was on Hajj, and one of his relatives, a woman came up. She was very beautiful, and in the Hajj you don't, and Abbas's cousin was like just staring at her. This is on Hajj, and he's in front of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, she was very beautiful, and that's what the hadith says. She had a beautiful face. So the Prophet took his head and turned it the other way. So then he says, the benefit of the dhikr of all of these names and attributes, all of these benefits are in dhikr al-fard. It's in the single dhikr, and that's saying Allah, Allah, Allah. And that is the extreme, that is the furthest purpose or end, and it's where everything arrives to. So, and that's not something, to do that consistently, you do need help. So I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. The best thing is to focus on your prayer in its time, to do the dhikrs, especially the du'as the Prophet gave us to do every morning and evening, those type things. That's the most important thing. Be consistent in those. For people that are really serious and are getting up at night and doing things, then you need some help. Gain some help from somebody who has authority in that area, and that's true. The dhikr al-fard, there's a debate about it. I was actually surprised to find this in the book because of Ibn Juzay, but it's definitely the Shadri, Abu Hassan, Ibn Atayillah, they're from that school. Not all the schools do that, doing Allah, 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 doing the dhikr al-fard. There's good hadiths. The Prophet said the end of time won't come until people stop saying Allah, Allah, Allah. So, I'm talking about, you know, this is a science. It's an experimental science, and just like any experimental science, you do things, things happen. It's like chemistry. You put this chemical in with this one, you get a reaction. Some of those reactions in chemistry are dangerous. When you get a chemistry kit for children, there's warnings, right? Certain things are done in the supervision of an adult. Well, it's like that with dhikr. There's certain things that you need the supervision of somebody that knows the effect. There's people that do names and they go crazy. And I've seen this, so I'm talking from experience. I have seen there's something called spiritual psychosis. It's real, and it happens to people. There are people that do too much dhikr, and they start getting psychotic. And that's why certain dhikrs are cold, they're cool, like prayer on the Prophet is a very cooling dhikr. It subdues the self. And there are other dhikrs that heat it up, and they start burning things up, and people can't take it. And then people are different. Some people are very balanced by nature. Other people are very volatile. So the dhikrs they do should be appropriate to the type personality or character that they have. And I would generally say, dhikr is medicine. Allah describes it as shifa, right? The Quran is a shifa. There are over-the-counter drugs, and then there are drugs that you need a doctor for. All right? As simple as that. You have over-the-counter drugs. Most of what the Prophet gave us is over-the-counter. But when you start getting into numbers and specific, like doing specific names, you need people that know what they're doing with that, because it's just not appropriate for people to be doing certain things. So, with caution. Now I want to finish this because we're done now. Which means they're completely absent from creation. It's as if they don't even see themselves. يَفْنَعْ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ وَعَنْ تَوْحِيدِهِ. Even that the self is witnessing the unity of God. They don't see that. And that's where you get some of the Sufis have outrageous statements that are unacceptable by Sharia. But they were said in these states of witnessing. Many famous statements. There's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ said, a man loses his camel in the desert. God is more happy with the tawbah of a servant than the one of you when he loses his camel in the desert and then he finds his camel and he's so happy he shouts, "Oh Allah, you're my slave and I'm your Lord." And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Akhta'a min shiddati farihihi." He made a mistake in what he said because he was so filled with excessive joy. That's in Sahih al-Bukhari. And that's the basis of what's called a shatha, which is an outrageous statement that we reject. But it's said under extreme state of joy or witnessing. So there's people that say, "Glory to me." They don't mean that. They're lost to themselves. Or there's no God except me. They don't mean that. It's this extreme state of ecstasy. Because in the end, the slave is the slave and the Lord is the Lord. And we adhere to that. And we don't believe in pantheism, in panentheism. God is not everything. We don't believe that this is God. This is God. We don't believe that. It's not like Hinduism, or we don't believe any of that. We believe that Allah has a creation. The creation is contingent upon Him. But we also believe that ultimately the only ultimate reality, independent of all things, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is dependent upon Him, and contingent reality has no intrinsic reality. It's only real based upon the fact that the one sustaining it is real. And so this is a very fine point of Tawheed that often the people of this science are attacked because people don't understand the sophistication of the thought, which is another problem. And he says this is what some of the Sufis call fana. Fana is found in the Quran. It's used, the word yafna. Everything goes into annihilation except God. So there is an idea of fana in the Quran. But it's a word that's used. It may have been taken from Buddhism. It's possible. Some of these people that introduced these mustalahat were from areas where Buddhism had been. Because the Buddhism, they use almost the identical term in their tradition, nibbana. So it might have been taken, Allahu a'lam, but it has a basis in the Quran. It's also not far-fetched that different traditions in their spiritual or internal practices arrive at very similar experiences. And the expressions of those experiences tend to be very similar. So that's also possible. People tend to attack tasawwuf as being derived out of previous traditions. But it's not true, and that's what he's really trying to show here, is that this all has a basis in the Quran. And it shouldn't be surprised that the previous traditions and our tradition have a lot of similarities, because we believe
that these great world religions are from God. So it's not surprising there would be similarities in them at all. And then also he says they lose sight of their tawheed. Now this is dangerous, which is why in the dua of Ibn Mashis he says, وَانْشُرْنِي مِنْ أَوْحَادِ التَّوْحِيد, protect me from the dangers of tawheed. Now Aisha radiallahu anhu, when she was given the bara'ah from God, God declared her innocent in the Quran. Her father and mother told her to go thank the Prophet. What did she say? I'll only thank God. She was in a state of witnessing. She didn't see the Prophet. She didn't see the sabab. She was only seeing the musabbib. And that's a type of state that people go into because Allah had declared her innocent. It wasn't anger or petulance or she was being childish. No, she was literally, she said, Kuntu ahqiru nafsi. I used to consider myself so insignificant, God would never make mention of me. Who am I for God? I mean, see, she had a total self-negation. So when she was accused of adultery, she thought, God is not going to say anything about this. She didn't think it'd be mentioned in the Quran. She thought maybe the Prophet would be told something, but she just said, I deem myself too insignificant. But she wasn't too insignificant. God mentions her, not by name specifically, but by the incident. And then he says, that is because of this immense istighraq, this drowning, this state of complete immersion in the witnessing. And that's why they said about the Prophet, kana da'imul ahzan, he was always depressed. That's in the Shama'il. And then in another riwayah, he was always happy. The ulama say that when he was with people, he was very sweet and smiled a lot and was very interactive with people. But if you saw him when he was in a state of dhikr, you would think he was depressed. But it wasn't depression. He was in such a deep state of contemplation that he was absent to his surroundings and the world. So people would look at him. But the Prophet did not have grief like that. How necessarily important is it to commit to one sheikh to develop your spirituality, inshallah, be elevated? I mean, I would say that, yeah, you'll get different opinions depending on who you ask. There's a nice translation of Ibn Abbad's letter on whether it's obligatory to take a sheikh. There's a saying, Man la shaykha lahu fa shaytanu shaykhuhu, and I think personally it's not a hadith, but it's a sound saying. Whoever doesn't have a sheikh, shaytan's his sheikh. But that generally, first and foremost, it means that you have to have a teacher of Sharia. You have to have somebody that teaches you the religion. When we visited Sheikh Nimr the other day for some of the men that were here, what did he keep saying? Get teachers, even if you have to pay them. Have teachers. You need teachers to guide you. You need to have sources of knowledge, those things. In terms of spiritual advancement, they're definitely, if people are having spiritual experiences and things like that, it's good to have people that know what they're doing. Sohbah is also good. Many of the shuyukh of this period, like Sheikh Ahmed Mashhur al-Haddad, who I studied with, Dr. Omar studied with, Sidi Abdul Hakim Winter studied with, he was of the opinion that the idea of taslim was over, surrendering yourself to a sheikh completely. This wasn't its time. And there's a lot of dysfunctional aspects in a lot of relationships that happen. So there are problems within all these systems. And surrendering your sovereignty, you have to be very careful about that, who you're going to give your sovereignty to. Some people demand a lot. There's a poem by Robert Frost. They say the truth will make you free. My truth will make you slave to me. So you just have to be careful. There's a lot of manipulation out there. People from Pakistan know very well about the Pir Sahibs and what happens in that system. I'm not making it up, am I? I mean, a lot of these people, they're just flat out charlatans. There's charlatans all over West Africa. Sufi sheikhs and, come and be a murid. And then they have a lot of, the danger of Sufism that bothers me about it is there's a lot of principles in tasawwuf that are very easily manipulated into certain cultic control mechanisms. and they become very dangerous. I think for those of us in the West, we come from a tradition of individual sovereignty and independence of self. And I personally believe those are very high Islamic characteristics and qualities. I think a lot of the problem in the East is all this slavishness and devotion and obsequiousness to, the Grand Master, Poobah, whoever. I mean, if you want my personal opinion, I do believe that. That does not mean that I don't show the utmost respect to my teachers. I do. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bay is my teacher, and I would be very hesitant to ever. But what I love about him is he's somebody that respects my opinion, listens to my opinion. He's never been despotic in any way. Habib Ahmed Mashhur al-Haddad was not despotic at all. He didn't get angry at people. He didn't abuse people. Those are the teachers that I had. Sifadul al-Hawari was like that. And so you just have to look to people, observe them. I would be really careful. That's all. You have to be very careful. There's a lot of people, and then there's some people that are not charlatans. They're either deluded, or they're trying to keep something alive that's important to keep alive, and they have their own limitations. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said that there weren't any complete teachers by his time. He's 9th century, so he already said that the completed masters were gone, and he said, so just find people that could do the best that they could and recognize their shortcomings, and don't have greater expectations than they can do that. So that's what I would say. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best.